Welcome back everybody to this channel. Today we're going to be looking at Rule 8200 of the Canadian Electrical Code, which is how we calculate service sizes for single dwellings. So I have a few rules that we're going to look at as well that are related to 8200. So we're also going to look at Subrule 3 of 8200. We're going to look at 8106, a couple subrules in there. We're going to look at 8108, 8110, and we're also going to look at section 62, rule 118, and that has to do with heating, and we'll see where that comes into play. And as always, be sure to look at the appendix B when you see that next to the rule. Alright, so what I got up here is a little layout, and some of you may recognize this and some may not, but these actually come from a really great textbook, Electrical Wiring Residential. It doesn't matter what edition you have, they're pretty similar. There would be some minor updates to each release though, because like the code book that updates every 3 years, this Electrical Wiring Residential book would also have to update every 3 years to match up the rules. But if you can get your hands on a copy of that book, it is an excellent book. I totally recommend it. I teach from it at various colleges. So yeah, that's where these images come from. Just grabbed a couple here. We're going to look at this and determine how we calculate the usable space. Before we do that, what I want to do is go over the rules themselves. Right, so Section 8, there's more to it than just 8200, but we're going to dial in and focus in on this rule here. All right, so just going to kind of go through them, all the rules I have here, kind of bounce around in the code book, talk about it, and then we'll go and do a service calculation, and I'll just kind of show you what we have coming up for that. So we'll just pretend that it's this house that we're doing. And in this home, we're going to have an air conditioner at 30 amps, electric baseboard heaters at 13,000 watts total load. And I make note that each of them have an individual thermostat. So like a baseboard heater in each room, it has its own thermostat, whether on the wall or on the unit itself. This home will have a wall mount oven and a cooktop. It will have an electric car charger without energy management system, and we'll look at that, but that's what the without EMS means. Overall though, the car charger has a load of 9,600 watts. We have an electric water heater at 3,000 watts. We have a well pump at 2,400 watts. And I should mention on there that it's, well, it doesn't matter for what we're doing. I was going to say it's 240 volt, but it doesn't matter. We need the wattage for this. And then we also have an exhaust fan, just a little exhaust fan that's 750 watts. Okay, so just some random stuff. Some of the stuff I actually grabbed right from the textbook, but I added a few things just to expand on some of the rules that the textbook does not expand on. Okay, so that's what we're going to have. Just, you know, just pretending that we have this in a home. Could have many more, could have much less. Like, and just, you know, electric baseboard heaters nowadays, nobody really has that. But I want to show you how you apply this part of the calculation. So I included electric baseboard heaters for this home. Okay, so let's just look at some of the rules here. So 8200 of the Canadian Electrical Code. Let's go at her. So the calculated load for the service or feeder supplying a single dwelling shall be based on the grade of item A or B. All right, so there's two parts here. All right, so the calculated load for a single dwelling is going to be based on either this calculation in A that we are going to do, or if for whatever reason this was a very small load and B ended up being greater, then we'd have to use item B here, right? So what this is basically saying in item B, and I'm just going to knock these two off first because it's very basic. Right, so let's just get these out of the way. So if you had 80 square meters or more of total living area or usable area, then you would apply 24,000 watts, right? And that 80 meters squared or more is exclusive of the basement. So if 80 square meters or more, right? Basically, you can look at it like this. You need minimum 100 amp service. And where do I get 100 amps from? Easy. If you take 24,000 watts and divide that by 240 volts, you get 100 amps. Right? This Ohm's law. Okay? Power divided by E. I always use 240 volt. Okay? So, exclusive of the basement, if your usable floor or usable space is 80 meters squared or more, it's a minimum 100 amp service or 100 amps. Okay, and then for the second one, if it was less than 80 square meters, then you would take 14,400, divide that by 240, and you'd see that minimum service size would be 60 amps. Right, so there is a minimum. There is a minimum that you can have. So this guy here would be 60 amp min, and if it was 80 square meters or more, then you have to have a basic load or apply 24,000 watts to that, which would give you 100 amps. And again, just so everyone knows where these numbers came from, and I'm just gonna get my pen thickness a little smaller here. That came from taking 24,000 and dividing by 240 volt, all right? And then this one would have been 14,400 divided by 240 volt. Okay, so that's where those come from. So if you go back up to the top here, again, just to review and just make sure we're all on the same page. The calculated load for the service or feeder supplying a single dwelling shall be based on the greater of A or B. So if you go through A, which we're going to do, but you found that it was less than this based on the floor space, then B would kick in because it is a greater number. But for the majority of the homes that you're going to be doing, this is gonna override B. Like, these are pretty small homes down here. Okay. Couple more rules I want to look at. Maybe I won't. I'll just go through them still. Let's just read them off. So let's focus on A. So how do we do these service calculations? Well, item A1 says you need to apply 5,000 watts for the first 90 meters squared of living area. So 5,000 watts would be applied to the first 90 meters squared of living area. Plus, right? So you're not done with your basic load there. Plus an additional 1,000 watts for each 90 meters squared. I'm just going to highlight these. And here's where some people get tripped up. So an additional 1,000 watts for each 90 meters squared or portion. So even if you got like 1 or 2 meters squared left over, you still have to add 1,000 watts. Right? It says or portion thereof in excess of 90 meters squared. So you got to watch that one. If you work out that your basic load is 91 meters squared, well, you're applying 5,000 watts for the first 90, and then you have to apply 1,000 for the remaining 1 meter squared. Okay, because a portion of, it doesn't have to be complete 90 meter square partitions. Okay, next one down, item 3 here. Any electric space heating loads provided for with demand factors as permitted in section 62, plus any air conditioning loads with the demand factor of 100%, subject to 81063. So let's pause there. Let's look at what this is all saying. So any electric space heating loads provided for with demand factors as permitted in section 62, right? We'll go look at that, but basically electric space heating loads at 100%. Okay? But there's a little caveat to that, and we're going to go look at Rule 62. So I'll slide my code book over here. Let's go look at that. If we go look at section 62, Rule 118, Subrule 3, right down here, it basically says where heating installation in a building for residential occupancy is provided with automatic thermostatic control devices in each room or heated area. The ampacity of service or feeder insulated conductors supplying heating devices only shall be based on the following. So in A200, it's saying you had to do 200%, or sorry, you had to do 100% of what it was rated for. That is true if you had just, say, an electric furnace that was controlled by a thermostat somewhere in the residence, one thermostat. But when you have individual thermostats or heating control in each heated area, this can kick in. And it says the first 10,000 watts of connected heating load, you put that in as 100%. Plus, the balance of the connected heating load would be at 75%. Okay? All right, so let's go back and, oops, another screen here. Go back here, and I'm going to say, I'm just going to put this in brackets. So, whoops, back that up. Put this in brackets for this rule here. With thermostat, you go 100% for the first 10,000. So 10,000, I'll say first 10 kilowatts at 100%. And then the remaining at 75%. And the reason is because there's a fat chance that these baseboard heaters or any kind of heater here that has individual control, fat chance they're going to be on all the time together. Whereas as opposed to if you had an electric furnace with one thermostat, well, it's just, yeah, it's one for one, right? That thing is on. Right? With baseboard heaters, individually controlled, they're not all going to be on at the same time. So that's the reason that they let you do that. Okay, the next tricky one that people get hung up on here. Oh, before I move on, sorry, let's go back to here. So that took care of the heating loads. Then it talks about plus, so it says plus any air conditioning loads. Right, with a demand factor at 100%. So heating, air conditioning, 100%. The only time heating is not 100% is when they have individual thermostatic control. Okay, but this continues on and says subject to 8106, sub rule 3. So I'm going to bring my code book back over. We're going to go to section 8, 106, sub rule 3. And that says, where interlocks are installed to prevent the simultaneous operation of electric space heating and air conditioning loads, whichever is the greater load shall be used in calculating the demand. Okay, so when you have an air conditioner and electric heater in the same residence, you're going to determine which one is the greater load, and that's the one that you will include. The other one doesn't have to be factored in because both are never going to be running at the same time. They're interlocked by your thermostat. Right? It's either your heating or your cooling. You can't have both. Okay? All right. Yeah, so 4. This one tricks people up a little bit. Any electric range load provided for as follows. 6,000 watts for a single range plus 40% of any amount by which the range exceeds 12,000 watts. Another way to look at this is for the first 12,000 watts, apply 6,000 watts. And then anything over that 12,000, you would take 40% of it. Okay, so 6,000 watts for the first 12,000. Don't worry about the 6,000 in between, all right? Just 6,000 watts for the first 12,000. Anything over 12,000, you apply 40% of it. Same idea as the heaters. Not all burners typically are on at the same time with the oven, all right? Got a couple on, maybe the oven. Really, the only time that you're fully loading your stove or your range is on holidays, all right? All right, next one. Number 5, any electric tankless water heaters or electric water heaters or steamers, swimming pools, hot tubs, or spas with a demand factor of 100%. And while I'm reading this, whoops, I'm going to go back there. While I'm reading this, why not let's add a hot tub. Let's add a hot tub. And I don't know, maybe it's, we'll say it's 40 amps. That's pretty common. 40 amps. 240 volt. Okay. This house is also getting a hot tub. Okay, but we'll see how we apply that rule. Basically, it's 100% of its rating. But I just want to point out one thing here. Electric tankless water heater. That's not to be confused with an electric water heater that sits in your basement. It's a tank that's, where it's maintained to keep hot, right? Like a gas furnace or a gas water heater. A tankless water heater is one of those, from what I understand, and I believe, are the instant on-demand water tanks. Or it's not even a tank. I shouldn't call it a tank because it's not. It doesn't hold water. It instantly heats the water as it goes through this unit, right? So it's a tankless water heater as opposed to the more typical ones that we see that are a tank of water that's kept warm or hot. Okay, so don't get that confused. Everything else is pretty self-explanatory. Item 6, except as permitted by 8106.11, and we'll go check that out in a second. Any electric vehicle supply equipment loads with a demand factor of 100%. So you got an electric vehicle, you got a charger, whatever that demand is for that, you put it at 100%, except 8106 says otherwise. And I think I put that rule in here somewhere. Let me go find it. I thought I put that in here. I guess not. Okay, I'll bring over my code book so we can see that. So 8106 subrule 11. So for that one, I'll get past all the first rules here. But basically what this rule is saying, and you can read it for yourself, if you have a vehicle charger that has electric vehicle energy management system, then you don't have to include this in your calculation. Right? You don't need to. And the reason is because these systems, the energy management systems, monitor the load on your service. And it will not allow you to charge your vehicle if the demand on your service is exceeding a threshold or a parameter that's been set. Right? So it can only charge or put a strain on the system. Now, I don't even want to say put a strain on it, but it can only draw from the system when the load on the actual service is low enough. All right, so, and usually people are charging their cars at night when everyone's sleeping and nothing's happening. So, but if it doesn't have an energy management system, then you have to include it at 100%. All right, and the last one here, any loads provided for that have a rating in excess of 1500 watts, in addition to those outlined in 1 to 6, right? So anything above and beyond what we just talked about, we need to apply 25% of its rating if an electric range has been provided for, or 100% of the combined load that goes beyond this, so you'd add it all up. So you go 100% of the combined load up to 6,000 watts, and if you have anything left over, you take the remainder at 25%. And you do that second part here if an electric range has not been provided for. So I'm not sure about the rest of Canada, but in Ontario, we typically put a receptacle in for an electric range regardless if there is going to be a gas stove or not. Well, obviously, if there's not, there would be an electric range. But if the client's going to put a gas stove in, well, I'm still going to be putting in a receptacle for this, so I would still be applying 7A here. Okay, so maybe in the comments somebody can speak for the rest of the country if that is the case. If there is no electric range going into homes and it's just gas only, are you still required to put a receptacle in for the electric range? I'd like to know. I'd like to know. So if you can speak to that, leave it in the comments. Okay, and one other rule I didn't bring up here, but I'll just talk about it for a second here. 8108, subrule 1 here. So it talks about the number of spaces for branch circuit overcurrent protection. And when you read into here, it says panel boards installed in single dwelling shall at the time of the original installation. So this doesn't really pertain to service upgrades, right? But it's still a good idea to follow this. But at the time of original installation, you need to have at least 4 additional spaces left for future overcurrent devices with provisions for a 2-pole breaker, right? So 4 additional spaces, 2 of them have to be side by side so you can fit a 2-pole breaker in, right? So you just can't have 4 spares spread out throughout the panel, because then you'd have to go back and rearrange circuits if you ever need to add a 2-pole breaker, right? So 4 spares, 2 of them have to be side by side. That's what it's basically saying. And just out of curiosity, we can go to the Appendix B here, and it just adds on to that. So the intent of the rule is to ensure that at the time of original installation, panel boards and dwelling units are provided with additional space to add overcurrent devices for future growth. Okay? And then I also want to point out this appendix here. So it talks about what if you have more than one electric range. And if you think about like maybe somebody's got like a little nook in the basement and they got a stove in the basement as well. So how do you apply that? Right? And it says down here, if more than one electric range is involved, the initial range will be provided for according to 8200, and then any additional ranges will be provided for by rules 8200, and basically goes to item 1A7, which says at 25%. All right, so it's this guy here. All right, so let's go look at our home and let's see how we do this. So what I got up here, and I want to talk about this too. So everything, our basic load is based on living area, all right? Living area. So if I look at the prints to this residential book, we got the basement, you know, unexcavated. That's obviously your garage over above. You got an unfinished rec room. You got a little workshop, unfinished area over here. All right, you got the porch and your stairs. In the basement, you got your furnace, water heater, couple other items, right? But in here, it's pretty empty. It's not finished, all right? And then the main floor, you know, it's a main floor: garage, kitchen, laundry room, bedrooms, right? So nothing fancy. But the code book talks about usable area, or living area. What is designated as living area? So if you look at Rule 8110, it tells you how to determine those areas. And it goes on to say the living area designated in Rules 8200, which is the ones we talked about. 8202 is for apartments, but we're looking at 8200, shall be determined from the inside dimensions, right? So the inside dimensions of a home. So you don't include the foundation, right? And include the sum of 100% of the area of the ground floor. So you would take 100% of the dimensions of the ground floor, inside dimensions, 100% of any areas above the ground floor used for living purposes, so not an attic, right? It's for living purposes, and again, inside dimensions. And then you're only going to take 75% of the inside dimensions of the basement. And the reason for that is, when you look at your basement, well, think about what's in your basement, whether it's finished or not. About a quarter of that is just utility room usage. You got your furnace, your water heater, you know, a workshop, whatever. Like, it's, you really don't hang out in here and watch TV and stuff. It's meant for mechanical equipment. It's a utility room, right? So you only take 75% of the basement. Okay, and then there's a little example here from the textbook, and it's based on the home, or on these prints here. It's based on that, but they're just kind of showing you how they went about the dimensions here, and we're going to use these dimensions. But they're going through and they say the walls are 100 millimeter thick, right? They gather all the dimensions, so 16.6765 meters by 10.67 meters, right? That's where these two numbers come in. They're subtracting the thickness of the walls, right? And they're getting this final number here for basically the perimeter. And then they're also deducting the garage, because that's not a living area. But then again, you know, it's a good man cave, but that's not determined as living area. Neither is the front porch, and neither is this little nook here that they have in the front of the home, right? This open patio. So they also deduct that from the total. And doing that, they determine that the inside dimensions of this home is 138.156. Okay, so I'm just going to write that over here as well in our calculation. 138.56, and I'll double check that in a second. Let's do it in a different color. So 138 point, go back over here, 156 meters squared. 0.156 meters squared. Okay, that's our usable living area. All right, so let's start calculating this home. Okay, so when you look at the rule, like, it goes kind of in an order here. Starts off with basic load, gets into heating, air conditioning, electric range, and so on. When you're doing this calculation, you do not have to do it in this order. And you'll see why after, but you do not have to do it in this order. But typically, this is where you would start, right? Doing your basic load, because you're starting with the dimensions, right? And it says everything's based on 90 square meter portions, right? So if I go over here to 138.56 and I divide that, I think my microphone was on mute there, so I'm going to kind of go back over this. So good thing was I noticed that quickly. What I've done is I've taken my 138.156 and divided by 90, because the whole basic load is based on 90 meters squared portions. And when I do that, I get 1.53. That tells me that I have definitely one portion of 90 meters squared. This half is going to kick me over to another portion, because when you go over and look at the rule, it says there's your 5,000 watts for the first 90 plus an additional 1,000 for each 90 square meters or portion thereof in excess of 90 square meters. Okay, so I have to apply the remainder, right? So I'll just put remainder. And I'm going to apply 1,000 watts. All right, and you could do the math just to be sure. But if I take 138.156 minus 90, that leaves me with 48.156 square meters. So that's why I had to do another 1,000, because I had 48.156 remaining after I took care of the first 90 square meters. All right, so it doesn't matter which way you do it. You could always just get this number and just keep subtracting 90. Or like I like to do is just take my number, my usable space and just divide it by 90. And that kind of gives me an idea how many portions I should have. All right, so our basic load is going to equal 6,000 watts. What's basic load? Well, the basic load is basically taking care of your general purpose receptacles and lights. That's what basic load is for. Okay? And I do believe that might be in the appendix somewhere. You'd have to go look that up. All right? But that first step we've done. We've taken care of items 1 and 2. Okay? So we're going to go look at our list that we created. This is make-believe home. Right? And we're just going to start knocking these items off. And again, they may not be in the exact order as the code book, and that doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. All right? But my first load is an air conditioner. And I've given you currents. So with this one, we're going to kind of have to figure out what is the wattage. So power equals I times E. All right? So you do that. 30 times 240. And again, I haven't worked this out ahead of time, so 30 times 240, calculator says 7,200 watts. All right, let's just keep this off to the side for a second. We know the AC is 7,200 watts. Okay, we also have a heating load in here. And air conditioning and heating loads fall under the same rule, item 3. Okay, so I just want to look at the heating load as well. We have a 13,000 watt heating load. Okay. Electric baseboard heaters at 13,000 watts. Okay. They're on individual thermostats. So remember, in 62.118, so 62.118 subrule 3, it says I take my first 10,000 watts at 100%, right? So 10,000 watts, and then I take the remainder and in our case our remainder is going to be 3,000 at 75%. So if I do the math on that, 3,000 times 0.75, it gives me 2250. So our heating load we're going to apply is 12,250 watts. Now the reason I want to keep the air conditioner on timeout for a second there is look at these two values. So we've got 12,250 for the heating, 7,200 for the AC. Let's go back and look at that rule again. Right? We're on individual thermostats, so we don't have to apply 100% of the heating load. So we got away with doing this. It also says to apply 100% of the air conditioner subject to 8106. Now 8106, just so we know what that was again, that's the one that said if you got interlocks, apply the bigger load right here. Right? So where interlocks are installed to prevent the simultaneous operation of electric space heating and air conditioning, whichever is the greater load shall be used in calculating the demand. Okay, so in this case, our electric baseboard heater, our electric baseboard heating load is greater than the air conditioner load. So we are going to apply, we're not going to use the AC. Whoops. Our AC load at 0 watts. Okay, but our heating load, because it's greater, come on, I'm tired. Heating load will be at, we say 12,250. Okay, that's done. So we've done the AC load, we've done the electric baseboard. Now we're going to the wall mount oven and cooktop. So this is one of those fancy ones where you got the ovens in the wall and the cooktop on maybe an island or just a countertop. But you treat it as one, as if it was like a range just tucked into the cabinetry. Right, so here we're going to have to add these two up. So we're going to take this add it into this, and so we got 6,600, 7,450, add that up, so 1,450 watts. Okay, let's go back. So over here I'm just going to put, I'm going to call it the range. We'll call it the range because really it's what it is. It's just separated into two, right? Range load will be at, well, let's go look at it. Let's go look at that rule. Any electric, so I'm looking at item 4, any electric range load provided for as follows. We're going to take for the first 12,000, we're going to apply 6,000 watts. Okay, so I'm going to apply 6,000 watts for the first 12,000. And that gives me a remainder, well, actually no, not a remainder, just leave it at that. 6,000 watts for the first 12,000, right? We have a 14,050 watt range, we'll call it. When you read on, it says after that first 6,000, you're going to apply 40% of any amount that exceeds 12,000. So how much do we exceed of the 12,000? We have 2,050 left over. All right, so 14,050 minus 12,000 leaves you at 2,050. All right, so of that 2,050 or 2,050, we're going to take 40% of it. So now we're going to go 2,050 times 0.4, all right, times 0.4. We're going to include 820 watts. So if you take the 6,000 plus the 820, for the range we're going to include in our calculation 6,820 watts. Okay, so I'll put that over here, 6,820. And again, it's because typically your burners and ovens are not all on at the same time, right? So the only time it's really happening is around the holidays. Okay, so now we've done this one. Okay, let's move on to the electric car charger without energy management system. It's 9,600 watts. That's the demand on this guy. Go over to the rules. Skip down to number 6. It says except as permitted by 106.11. And I'm not going to bounce there, but that rule states that if you have an energy management system, then you don't have to include the load of the vehicle charger. But ours doesn't have one, right? So let's continue reading. So any electrical vehicle supply equipment load with a demand factor of 100%. So whatever that charger's rated at, that's what you include. So we're at 9,600 watts. Let's put that in. Let's shrink this down a bit. I'll use red for this one. So vehicle charger. At 100%, 9,600 watts. Okay, done. All right. Done. Now we have a water heater at 3,000 watts. All right, well, does this say anything about a water heater? No. The only thing it talks about water is in item 5, but it's talking about an electric tankless water heater. So that's going to basically leave us at sub-rule or item 7, where it says if an electric range has been provided for, which it has been in this case, we will take 25% of the rating of the load as long as it exceeds 1,500 watts. Okay, this is how it's enabled right here. Okay, is our electric water heater greater than 1,500 watts? Yes, it is. So we're going to take that 3,000 watts. I'm going to take this times 0.25 because we only want 25% of it. And the reason is same thing. The heating elements aren't always on. They toggle on and off, back and forth. All right, so 3,000 times 0.25. That means we need to include 750 watts in our tally here. So electric water heater. We're going to, at 25%, therefore 700 and, let's say 750, yeah, 750 watts. Okay, done. That one's done. Electric water heater. Now we got the well pump. Let's do the well pump. So we have a well pump at 2400 watts. There's nothing in the rules that specifically talks about well pumps. So again, it brings us down to, let's take 25% of the rating of that well pump. Why 25%? Well, because we have an electric range included in our calculation. All right, so we don't have to worry about that for future. Electric range being put in and taking an even greater demand on the system. So 2400 watts times 0.25, and that will give me 2400 times 0.25, 600. So now we're going to include 600 watts for the well pump. $600 watts. Done. That one's done. Okay, we're almost finished here. Then we have an exhaust fan at 750 watts. Okay, so exhaust fans, change it up here. Trying to color code it just to separate all the items. So an exhaust fan. Now, I threw this in here just to show you, or to make sure you watch out for stuff like this. It's 750 watts. If you go back and look at 8200, there's nothing specific about exhaust fans, right? So we come down to item 7 again. Now, this one again only is enabled when the rating is in excess of 1500 watts. Our exhaust fan's only 750 watts, so we don't apply anything to it. All right, it's less than 15. If it's 1500 exact, then you would have to include it. But when you read the rule, it says rating in excess of 1500. Okay. All right. One more item is the hot tub. Everyone wants a hot tub. Even I want a hot tub. Okay, so we got a hot tub at 40 amps, 240 volts. So let's find out the wattage. And really, you don't have to find a wattage out because you'll see why later on. I could just take the amperage and add it to my calculation later, but let's just do it anyways. So I want to find out the wattage. So power equals I times E. Right, 40 times 240, and the wattage at that instance would be 40 times 240, 9600 watts. So how do you apply this? Let me get this over here and get it ready. Hot tub. And I'm just going to separate the color. Let's go back to red. Hot tub. So think about hot tub. What is it? It's hot, right? Why is it hot? It's got water heaters in it, right? And when you look at the rule here, item 5, any electric tankless water heaters or electric water heaters for steamers, swimming pools, hot tubs, or spas, you take it at 100%. Right? So we worked out 9600 watts. Therefore, our hot tub at 100% equals 9600 watts. Okay. We have taken care of all the items in this home. So we're done our list. We did our basic load. We came through and took care of everything that's going in the home. I should mention too, if you're wiring homes, especially custom homes, always talk to your client and make sure you understand fully what is going in that home, right? So you know how to properly size the service. Here, this is what we had. So all you do now is you add up all the loads, all these loads that we came up with, right? We're going to add these all up. So let me add these up. So we got 6,000, 12, 250, 6820, 9600. Make sure I don't fat finger my calculator. 750, 600, and 9600. That gives us a total wattage of 45. Yeah, let me move that down. And different color, just to separate everything. Gives us a total of 45,620 watts. That's the demand on this home. So what do we do with it? All right. Well, we got to find a service size. We don't go to the supplier and ask for a 45,000 watt rated load center, right? So we got to convert this to amps. All right. So we go I equals P divided by E. All right. And we're going to take our 45,620 divided by 240, not 120, 240. All right. Divided by 240. And that gives us 190 amps. We need a service, minimum size 190 amps. Obviously, you can't go to the supplier and say, I need a service entrance rated panel with a 190 amp breaker, right? So knowing this, we are going to end up with a 200 amp load center. And again, at load center, make sure it has spare breakers, right? At least 4. And of those 4, 2 have to be side by side to accommodate a 2-pole breaker. Okay? And just in case some of you question about equipment rating, the 80% rule and all that, if you go, and I gotta find the rule because I'm just thinking this in my head, a residential load calculation is considered non-continuous. Where did I see that rule the other day? I might have to post this in the comments because I don't want to waste any more video time. Oh, right here. So it is 8200, still the same rule, but sub-rule 3. So total load calculated in accordance with either sub-rule 1 or 2 shall not be considered a continuous load. So this is considered a non-continuous. We can load this puppy up, this breaker, this 200 amp breaker right up, right? So 190 amps, 200 amp breaker, size your conductors, and that's it. That's basically how you do a service calculation. So I hope this helps. If you have any questions, just leave it in the comments. I'll try to get back to you. And yeah, watch out for the next video. I will probably do a video in the next few days on conduit fill. All right, take care. Have a good day.